I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here with Shad Imam, Director of Solutions Engineering at MuleSoft. Shad, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much, Wyatt.
Well, let me start by asking, what does IT modernization look like and mean in government in 2021?
You know, it's a great question. And in fact, I can tell you what it used to mean, right? It used to mean that we would be able to go into government agencies and upgrade our hardware and our software and call it a day. Say, hey, we've modernized, guys. We're on the latest version of XYZ hardware and the latest version of XYZ software. But that's no longer really the case, especially in a world today where everything is moving towards cloud and SaaS providers. In our world, IT modernization has really become a critical part of moving forward in the digital economy. And I think that's what we're seeing with so many of our government agencies that we're working with on a day in and day out basis. Modernized systems, we used to do that in order to do new things in innovative ways. But what we're seeing with the demands around us is that in 2021, this is just how we're going to have to keep moving forward, right? So for government, for instance, we're seeing a lot towards automation, right? And things like ID renewals. We don't want to have to go stand in line at a DMV, right? Or at an agency to go get an ID. It means that we've got greater expectations from our customers. We've now got greater expectations, to do this type of automation. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we're able to leverage our existing enterprises, whatever might be there, the hardware and the software that's there, in order to actually do something innovative as opposed to just maintenance. So really, IT modernization it's moving towards the modularized enterprise, right? And that's something that MuleSoft really has been pushing for the last decade. The days of the big monolithic systems, that's really kind of gone the way of the dodo bird, right? We're focusing now. Many of the government customers and prospects that we're working with are focusing on microservices, on platforms that are portable. They want to help respond to change effectively. They don't want their systems to hinder that change, right? And so all of that just breeds itself into new discussions around integration and around security and microservices. And these have become now core parts of the conversation. And organizations, as they're moving to the cloud, they need to focus on these modernization efforts so that it's not just about infrastructure and hardware and software upgrades.
Great. Next, in your experience working with federal agencies in particular, how did the pandemic affect the need to modernize more rapidly?
Oh, no, great question, Wyatt. In fact, I would say, and I've actually joked about this with my team, is that it moved modernization efforts from a nice to have to a must have, right? Offices, all last year, we saw offices were closing down all around the world, not just the country, but people still needed to get their jobs done. So the move to the digital world accelerated because of the pandemic. One thing we've really seen a shift in recently has actually been the API economy. Just this morning, actually, the Harvard Business Review has an article entitled "APIs Aren't Just for Tech Companies." Right? Application programming interfaces have now become the connective tissue and the nervous system for organizations in terms of applications, data, devices, all talking to each other. And MuleSoft, that's exactly what we've seen as well in our experience. There's this proliferation now of API strategies and ecosystems all popping up across governments. And it's all been accelerated because of the pandemic, right? Those things that were once part of a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan are now essentially, we've got to do this in months, if at best a year, in order to really keep up with everyone else.
Well, speaking of 5-year plans, what major priorities stand out for modernization in government today as we do move forward?
I would say modularizing enterprises to be more agile and address change head on and not as an afterthought is really the key, right? And I think for far too long, government agencies have been afraid of change. Right. And when we look at things like our cell phones and we see all the changes that are happening on the apps and how often we have to update them, that's really scary to somebody on the back end who's got to maintain those systems, right? And especially those systems of record. And so how do we try to address that change head on, right? We oftentimes at MuleSoft talk about franchising or democratizing data, right? Making data accessible across the enterprise. It's not something that's just, it's something that should be usable and actionable for our government agencies, but more often than not, what we've seen is just getting to the data and getting it in a format that actually is usable we spend more time doing that than making any decisions based on it. So what really we saw over the last, especially the last year, is now how do we get the data into the hands of individuals that need to make decisions, oftentimes in real time, right? We do that by abstracting the data out from the development, that modularization, that microservices-based architecture. Then we can apply security, we can apply governance, we can apply policies, all at the modular level, and not have to worry about these big behemoth systems and what we're doing, in order to try and get those systems upgraded and modernized, if you will. So it's really, for what we've seen, it's all about modularization and data, kind of that data democratization, that data franchising for our government agencies.
That makes sense. Leslie, after modernization, what comes next in government?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is something that we oftentimes spend a lot of time with our customers talking about what's next on the horizon, right? We've all been kind of struck by the rapid pace at which there's needed to be change over the last 12 to 15 months. But what's next? In my conversations with CIOs, it's all about innovation now. Once we get things modernized, once we have systems in place that can adapt to change, that can be agile, that can respond to our government agency or to all the forces in the world around us that we're seeing, the next step is now let's start innovating, right? And we want to do some of that along with the modernization, but innovation is really talking about the future. That's getting into markets, getting into experiences with our citizens and our customers that we don't have today, right? How do we future-proof our organizations, our government organizations, to face the challenges of tomorrow? I think that's really the key. So what we've seen is that our integration platforms, right? Platforms like MuleSoft, for instance, or others, they should accelerate the delivery of applications, right, to our customers. They should automate security, right, across the board. They should provide resilience in operations, and most importantly, help government agencies future-proof their foundations, right? So the more, for instance, we don't know what artificial intelligence or machine learning could be the next wave of the future. We want to make sure we've got the right platform in place today to adopt those changes. And I think that's really where we're going to see that innovation, that kind of really accelerate into the nth degree now, once these modernization efforts have really started taking hold.
Well, Shad Imam, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights with us today. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much, Wyatt.